Hey everyone, welcome to Tenfingers channel. In this video, I am going to teach you how to configure Entity Framework Code First approach using Data Annotation Attributes. Code First approach. There are two situations to take the decision to use Code First approach in Entity Framework. One, if database exists, but it has no tables and you want to create it by your code. 2, database not exist, and you want to create new database with tables by your code. Implementation of code first. At first, we must create connection string to connect our database server in app.config file. That's it. Now, I am going to create student, subject, student mark, course, and parent table using this approach. So, I have to create 5 model objects. Let's see. Now, I will be creating student entity model object. In the same way I have already created remaining entity model objects. Our model objects are created. Now, we must create a context class. Name of the class can be same as name of the connection string. Or if we want to give different name, we can pass name of the connection string in the base constructor as parameter. Or we can pass the whole connection string into the base constructor. Inherit DB context base class. Create DB set properties for each entity. Now, we must know how to define primary, foreign keys, table associations and other definitions in Entity Framework. We can achieve this in two ways. 1 by using Data Annotation Attributes. 2 by using Fluent API. I want to make two separate videos to explain code-first approach. So, in this video, as I said, I am going to explain about code-first approach, using Data Annotation Attributes. Data Annotation Attributes are key, table, foreign key, index, required, not mapped, column, MaxLength, MinLength, StringLength. Let me explain one by one. Key attribute. It can be used in column property of the entity, to define primary key. Key attribute also helps us to define identity. We have three database generated options. 1 identity, it will auto-generate a new ID, whenever a new row is inserted into table. No need to give value to this property. 2 computed, it will auto-generate a new ID, whenever insert or update transaction made in table. No need to give value to this property. 3 none, we must specify the value of the column explicitly. If the column property name is ID, we no need to specify key attribute to create primary key. By default, Entity Framework will create primary key with identity, if name of the column property is ID. I have created ID column in student mark table and key attribute not specified for the column. For remaining tables, I have used key attribute to define primary key. Now, let's run the project. When we execute entity statement for first time, it will check for the database which is specified in connection string. If database exist, entity framework will only create tables which satisfies the first situation. If database not exist, entity framework will create database then creates tables. I have no database. Let's check our f_tutorial database created or not. As I said, database created by entity framework. And let's check tables now. As you can see, for all the tables except student mark, primary key created by key attribute with identity option. Student mark table also has primary key with identity option. Because name of the column is ID. Now let's discuss about table attribute. It can be used in entity, when name of model object is not same as table name. Now, let's run the project. I have changed entity class name as student_details, which is different from student table. Let's see what we get. We are getting error. Now, if we use table attribute and specify table name explicitly, even if the name of the object and table name is different. We are not getting error. So we must follow these two conditions, to specify table name. 1. Name of model object and table name should be same. 2. If names are different, use table attribute with table name as parameter. That's it. Next. Foreign key attribute. It can be used in property. This attribute helps us to create foreign key and relationship between tables. In the previous execution, as we can see, tables are created without associations. In my case, in student marks table, there are two columns references parent tables. Student ID references student table, and subject ID references subject table. Foreign keys are created in two ways. 1. Specifying foreign key attribute on navigation property, and pass name of the referenced column. 2. Specifying foreign key attribute on referenced column, and pass name of the navigation property. Now, let's run the project to check foreign keys are created or not. Foreign keys has been created by Entity Framework. Navigation property is a property which is used to create one-to-one, one-to-many, and many-to-many relations between parent and child tables. I will explain about this relations at end of the video. Next one is index attribute. It can be used in column property, on which we create an index. Parameters. Name. The index name. Order. A number which will be used to determine column ordering for multi-column indexes. Is clustered. Set this property to true to define a clustered index. Set this property to false, to define a non-clustered index. Is unique. Set this property to true to define a unique index. Set this property to false, to define a non-unique index. Required attribute. It can be used in column property. By default, text property without required attribute specified, allows null values. If you want to ignore null value, in particular nullable type column, you must specify required attribute on it. Also want to ignore empty string value, in nullable type column, additionally, we must use allow empty strings parameter. Specify, true if an empty string is allowed, otherwise, false. The default value is false. Now, I am going to specify required attribute on email column property of the student object. Let's check. As you can see, email column created with not null. By default, all the value type columns, not allows null values in database. But, if you want to make value type properties as nullable, and you want to store null values on it, we must specify question mark next to the type of the property. Let's check. Before that, need to check semester column status in the previously created database. It shows it will not allow null values in semester column, right? Now, I am going to put question mark after the type of semester column of the subjects table. Let's check again. Now, it will allow null. NotMapped attribute. It can be used in property of the entity, to indicate this property is not a column of the table. Entity framework ignores this property when mapping database table as entity object. To check, I am going to specify NotMapped attribute on phone column property of student object. Let's check. As I said, phone column is not created, this column ignored by entity framework, because we specified NotMapped attribute on it. Next one is column attribute. It can be used in property. This attribute helps us to give different name to the property of the entity class. If you do not want to show column name of the table in entity framework query statements, you can use this column attribute. You must give name of the table column as parameter. And if you want to change type of the property, you must pass the name of the type of column as second parameter. Also you can specify the order of the column in the table as third parameter. Second and third parameters are optional. Here, I have decided to give name external underscore mark for column of student marks table. But property name is external mark. And also, I want to give name of the type as numeric, which is available in SQL Server. Let's run the projects. As you can see, external underscore mark column is created, and the type is different from type of the property. Next one is maximum length attribute. It can be used in property. This attribute helps us to limit length of array, or string characters. We can show customized error message, when the value of the column is more than the value which we specified in MaxLength attribute. I have explained this MaxLength attribute before, when index created using index attribute. Next one is minimum length attribute. It can be used in property. This attribute helps us to limit length of array, or string characters. We can show customized error message, when the value of the column is less than the value which we specified in MinLength attribute. Next one is StringLength attribute. It can be used in property. This attribute helps us to limit length string characters. We can show customized error message, when the length of the value of column is not equal to the value which we specified in StringLength attribute. Now, what is one-to-one, one-to-many, and many-to-many relations? One-to-one is the way of relating parent and child tables, when one child object references one parent object. For example, every student has one parent. So, we must create student navigation property on parent entity class, and create parent navigation property on student entity class. Navigation properties helps us to manipulate data from associated tables in a single entity framework statement. You can understand navigation properties in upcoming videos. To create one-to-one relation, we must create primary key and foreign key on same column of child table. So, I have used both key and foreign key attributes on student parented. Next, one-to-many. A student can write more than one exam and have marks of those exams. So, we must create student navigation property on student marks entity class, and create collection of student marks navigation property on student entity class. Now, many-to-many. A student can study many courses, and one course can be studied by many students. So, we must create collection of students navigation property on courses class. And create collection of courses navigation property on student class. But, as you can see, still there is no association between them. Course object has no student ID column, and student object has no course ID column. To create many-to-many relationship between two tables, we must create bridge table, which will act as bridge between them. So, I am going to create student course bridge table, and we must create composite primary key on student ID and course ID columns. And these columns also references respected table, which are used to relate students and courses tables. Now the combination of student ID and course ID will be unique. And we must include students and courses navigation properties, to tell entity framework to identify, this bridge table will be created for student and course table. That's it. I hope you can understand how to configure entity framework code first approach, using data annotation attributes. In the next video I will explain How to configure entity framework code first approach, using Fluent API. If you like this video, share, like, and subscribe my channel. Thank you.